When they had eaten their meal, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, begot of John, do you love me more than these?" Peter said, "Yes, Rabbi, you know that I am your friend." Jesus said, "Tend my sheep." A second time Jesus put his question, "Simon, begot of John, do you love me?" Peter said, "Yes, Rabbi, you know that I am your friend." Jesus replied, "Tend my sheep." A third time Jesus asked him, "Simon, begot of John, do you love me as a friend would?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked, "Do you love me?" A third time he said, "You know everything, Rabbi. You know that I am your friend." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. The truth of the matter is, when you were young, you put on your own belt and walked where you liked. But when you get old, you will stretch out your hand, and someone else will put a belt around you and take you where you do not want to go." With these words, Jesus indicated the sort of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then Jesus said, "Follow me," the good news of salvation. My allergies are bothering me a lot. My voice is a little thicker. In today's readings, we hear Jesus speak to Peter. "Feed my sheep," he calls. He calls all of us to do the same, to nurture one another. I want to speak about our connection to each other. When I came to Dignity, I was uncertain just how my sexual identity fitted in me as a person. From my teens, I knew some were able to quite easily and forcibly assert themselves. But I know, and in some ways, never have. It was in Dignity that I came to believe that my sexuality was the very substance, the glue of my being human. In the darkness of the night, I understood the sexual hunger was the hunger for love, for connection, for being with and caring for others. That is what made me, us, alive to the world, that it was from God. The year was 1972, and my first job upon graduation with a master's in library science and archival management was at the library of the Woodstock Jesuit College on 125th Street, just off Broadway. That same year, John McNeil was organizing a Dignity chapter at the Jesuit House at 98th Street and Broadway. The second chapter after that in Los Angeles. It included priests and lay brothers of the Woodstock community, and from other religious orders, Episcopalian priests and laypersons, both men and women. John said, "Dignity is what we give each other." In the years following the Stonewall Uprising, the queer community mobilized to advance the cause of justice. It was agreed that Dignity New York, New Jersey would be a lay-led organization, a support group, but soon grew into be a place of worship. The Jesuit chapel was used for that purpose, while the common room on the ground floor was where we met for socials and discussions. It was there we voted to join in the Gay Pride Parade for 1973. Our banner became an intense matter of discussion. Should it say Catholic homosexuals or Catholic homophiles? The latter won the vote. Quickly, a diversity of people were joining. This included Jewish members. They held their services in the rectory of Holy Apostles Church. Later, that group would form the nucleus of the Congregation for Beth Simchat Torah. The creation of a steering committee led to the formation of a social action group. A women's group leads to the formation of a feminist issues committee. The skills these people brought to Dignity resulted in an outpouring of gay, lesbian topics in print, and not only in major news sources like the New York Times, Post, Newsweek, Channel 13, and the series of programs WABC TV, even a documentary on Dignity New York produced by German TV, but also the chapter began a quarterly called Insight. The book by John McNeill, The Church and the Homosexual, having been under review for 3 years, starting in 1973, as having its first printing in 1976, which included the imprimi potest, that is, having nothing contrary to the church doctrine. This was given by the New York Provincial of the Society of Jesus. John's book explodes across the media. John appears speaking on 38 TV shows. The following year, however, John is silenced by Rome, forbidden to speak on the subject. John consented, but spoke out of the subject of freedom of conscience. He did so until AIDS, when John felt compelled to speak out when the Vatican released a doctrine on the pastoral care of homosexual persons that defined homosexuality as more or less strong tendency toward an intrinsic moral evil. For this, John paid a terrible price. He was expelled from the Society of Jesus in 1987. A peer counseling program began in 1977 under Janine Hoff, psychiatrist and transgendered woman. She died recently in 2023 at the age of 85. SAGE is organized by Damian Martin, a member of the steering committee. The Hedrick Martin Institute is the same fellow, Damian Martin. Dignity members renovate a building at 40th Street and 9th to house a homeless women's shelter called The Dwelling Place, staffed by the Sisters of the Allegheny. Dignity volunteers cook meals for people with AIDS, housed in Bailey House on Christopher and Hudson Street. Weekend retreats are held at the Women of the Grange, a large Edwardian house in Cornwall and Hudson. Dances are held, plays written by our own members such as Dan Clancy and performed in our community. Concerts were given, films produced, home liturgies began, meals were served. We even had not just cookies and coffee and sodas, but we had full meals served. After Dignity, weekly service, bike rides, and yet softball games were played. Chapters in all 5 boroughs established, and on Long Island and northern New Jersey, membership grows. There were, towards the end of the 70s, almost 400 people in Dignity, New York. This place, on a night like this, they would be sitting in these bays and folding chairs. There were so many. With the suggestion of the Mattachine Society, Dignity opens a prison ministry, corresponding to nationwide, and a visitation program in the Queen's House of Detention. A protest march to Washington is organized in 1975, Catholics for Gay Rights, with a press conference at Georgetown University. The bill, Intro 2, in 1974, is presented in the New York City Council, establishing protection of gay, lesbian people in housing and employment. The Archdiocese speaks out, protesting, citing it a threat to family life. It's joined by the Orthodox Rabbinate and the Uniform Fire Officers Association. Dignity begins a monthly protest at the cathedral. Gay Pride writes, "We stand at the steps of the cathedral." A political arm is organized, Catholics for Gay Civil Rights, as an adjunct to the Social Action Committee. In that same year, Woodstock College closes and Dignity must seek a new home. This begins a 15-year wandering, only ending in 1989, when for a second time we returned to St. John's. From 1978 to 1987, Dignity had found a home in St. Francis Xavier Church. But the Archdiocese threatened to withhold funding for its school, and the parish was forced to expel Dignity. That event was covered by the nightly news as members of Dignity walked with lighted candles to the center on 13th Street. And another protest begins, called the Cathedral Project, which lasted for 3 years. It began with a silent protest within the cathedral, street lying in monthly liturgies across the street under the Atlas, large crowds covering the Fifth Avenue, standing, watching quietly, indicating by their manner support. One Easter, I noticed that our clergy were handing communion to some of these people beyond the barricades, and there's something else. The public relationship was terrible to the Archdiocese at this time. The arrests, the court hearings, finally compelling the cardinal to dialogue, resulting a lifting of the Archdiocese's opposition to the Gay Civil Rights Bill, which passed in 1986. I remember receiving a letter from Avery Dulles. He was the son of John Foster Dulles, the Secretary of State under Eisenhower, the man who developed the domino theory that caused endless wars in the Southeast Asia, the man who overturned the duly elected premier of Iran, Mossadegh, in 1953, because he was a socialist. Yes, Avery Dulles wrote and said from Rome, by this time he was a cardinal. James, he said, this is wrong. And I wrote back, Avery, it is right. We have to stand for justice. The Archdiocese, Father Bernard Lynch appeared before the City Council in May of 1986, urging the passing of Intro 2. The Archdiocese moved against Bernard to expel him from the country, he not being a citizen. In 1988, he was accused of molesting a student in the school where he taught. The Archdiocese was joined by the District Attorney's Office and the State Department. The trial was held in the Bronx courthouse. Dignity members acted as runners for the lawyers. The press was present. Bernard was not only found not guilty, but innocent. The plaintiffs were excoriated by the judge. In 1988, the Pride March included the homophobic dragon, so large it needed a dozen or more to move it in its claws the Pope and the Cardinal, and at the back, a rat in Cardinal's red. And while we were finishing up that dragon on 59th Street in Columbus Circle, this man approached me. He was smiling in a very strong German accent. He said, my wife, and he pointed to this woman over there, she is a cousin of Cardinal Ratzinger's. It was incredible. All of this, and Dignity won a prize for that float. All this happened as the AIDS crisis came upon us. Despite the fear, Dignity established an AIDS ministry in 1983, serving hundreds of those suffering with AIDS. It was the first religiously afflicted organized ministry, and Father Bernard Lynch, one of the leaders, was appointed to the Mayor's Advisory Board on AIDS. We really had some very tough moments. One, Steve Snurr. Steve was like Jimmy Lopez Acosta, able to create organized, planned programs and full of humor and laughter. And he was 32 years old. And I was baking cookies for Christmas, and the phone rang, and it said that Steve was failing. So I went down to Beth Israel and stood beside his father, one arm around his father and the father's arm around me, and we stroked Steve and talked to him. And that night, he died. Another one was Tim McGinty. Tim was another young man, and when he was in the hospital, Dignity members took turns sleeping in the empty bed alongside in his room so he wouldn't feel that he was alone. And his last home we prepared for him was in an apartment on James Street. And I was in York, England, just sitting down for dinner. When it came to me, I said, Timmy has died. And he had died. The toll was very high. None of this was easy. Many in our chapter and other chapters and the national office even were fearful of the militancy of Dignity New York. They feared the publicity and the legal threats. We lost many members. Today, we are in a new century, and we live with mobiles and artificial intelligence, Starlink and podcasts, and all the rest leaving the past in the dust. Young people just grew up differently, but the dangers facing us are no less real. Perhaps they're worse. The fear and insecurity that many would deny our very right to exist. We need to hold on to each other. How we do this may differ from the past, but we are called to give our support and talent and resources to our community where our strength lies. We face the common threat. Thank you. I'm going to suggest to the steering committee that we reprint this history so that you can read and